What if every time you renewed your driver's license, they changed your race on you without your permission or without your knowledge, even? That's exactly what happened to my ancestor, Alberto Simon, who was born in Louisiana and died in San Antonio, Texas. Over the decades, his race was rewritten from mulatto to Spanish and then to white, depending on who was doing the recording. Proving you're a white is nebulous. Like, what is white? Who is white? At the same time, a man named Ricardo Rodriguez, who was a Mexican immigrant in San Antonio as well, stood in court fighting for the right to be seen as white so that he could become a US citizen. But these stories just aren't about the past. They reveal how race was used to control who belonged and who didn't. Stay with me because this history might change how you see your own story. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here on my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. And I am really excited about today's video because I get to do both. I'm going to tell a little bit about my third grandfather, Alberto Simon, and kind of give you the context of what was going on during his life. Because his story doesn't just stand alone. None of our ancestor stories do. We're always situated in history. In the court case Ricardo Rodriguez, they tackled the question, who gets to belong in America, by asking the question, are Mexicans white? You may have seen the video I did a few weeks ago with one of my genealogist friends, Juan Zapata. He focuses on Mexican genealogy, and he helped me dig in a little bit more into this ancestor, and so he's going to speak a little bit in this video as well. So I'm really excited. I would love to send you over to his YouTube channel or to hire him. He's an incredible genealogist. So let's start in Louisiana in the 1800s. This is where my ancestor Alberto Simon was born. Now, Louisiana is a place of cultural collision. You have the French, you have indigenous, you have Spanish, you have Anglo, you have African. I mean, really everything. You have all these influences blended, and it creates a complexity and a complex social structure where being labeled as mulatto came with significant barriers. But over time, the census records documented his racial identity changing. I really believe that these shifts are important to talk about because they demonstrate with primary sources over and over again the constructed nature of race in America.
So Alberto Simon lived through a very pivotal time period from his birth in 1850, as estimated by his 1944 death record, onward into 1944. And you see a lot of changes that happen throughout the documentation in terms of how he is classified. Just to go from the beginning onward, as a lot of the documentation has conflicting information, I will state that generally credence is given to the oldest piece of documentation in genealogy. So in 1860, his birthplace is stated to be Louisiana. In 1900, he is listed as a mulatto, which is somebody under the Spanish caste system, at least, that is half white, half black, racially speaking. His father's birthplace was listed as Mexico here, and his mother's as Texas. In 1910, his race is listed as Spanish, which, you know, if we're going by the Spanish caste system, that would just mean that he's completely white. Then his father is listed as being from Canada French, so Canadian French, and his mother's listed as being from Texas, so a lot of variation here. In 1920, his father is listed as being from Louisiana, and so is his mother. And in 1940, he is listed as being white in his birthplace as being from Louisiana, matching the 1860 census, but now being classified as white. What happened with a lot of Latinos or people that were classified that way is that, legally speaking, there was a lot of challenges going on, such as the 1896 Henry Rodriguez case, and then there were subsequent cases as well that were fought that legally classified a lot of Latinos as white. So even though they may not present that way, they were legally classified as that. So I believe that's why Alberto Simon was classified ultimately in the 1940s as a white man, even though he likely was not. His parents were listed as mulattoes. So again, it's further evidence again that he was racially mixed, and then again later on, because of the legal court cases and things that happened, that's why he ultimately was later listed as white. Now, with a lot of documentation, you have people that are family members that give information. So it could have been in this case that Modesto Simon, his family member, gave the information that his parents were from the Canary Islands. Maybe he was under the wrong impression, or there was an assumption made, but it is factually incorrect. However, it is fascinating that it was even written down in his 1944 death record in the first place.
Okay, so I want to just quickly show you him in my tree, and I'm gonna take you through where he is at. So this is my great grandmother, Lola. Her mother's last name was Simone. They ended up pronouncing it Simon. Her name was Julia Victoria, is who I'm talking about. Severin Alberto Simon. He was born in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and died in San Antonio. And his parents were Juan Simone and Marie Juana Cordova. And in some of their records, they're listed with their Hispanic, like Latin names, but Louisiana is very French. So in the 1860 census, he's listed as mulatto. He's 12 years old. And the 1900 census, he's listed as mulatto. And after his wife, great great grandmother, had passed away, he remarried a woman named Margarita, and they were living in Texas. And these records are really interesting. I'm going to go down to the real one so you can see, because they contradict each other so much. So here he's listed as Alberto Simon, and it says that his birthplace is Texas. I believe he was born in Louisiana, but he went back and forth a lot between Natchitoches and San Antonio. It said his father was born in Mexico and his mother's birthplace was Texas. Okay. Now I know this is the same family. It's the right family, but that census was a little bit off. So then he is here again, and 1910, he's listed now as Spanish, and his father is listed as Canada. If you go into the record, it actually says Canada French. So again, I think there might have been some confusion being from Louisiana, and his mother's birthplace is still listed as Texas. And he's in Texas there. In 1940, this is just a couple years before he's about to die. He's now listed as white, and his birthplace is listed as Louisiana. He's living in San Antonio, Texas, and he's by himself. There's nothing about his parents there. And then I have his death certificate, and he's listed as white on here, but there's something really interesting. I did another video on this. His father's name is here, Juan Simon. Here he is, male, white. His mother, Maria Cordova, is here, but she's listed as being born in the Canary Islands. She was not born in the Canary Islands, but the family does have a connection to the Canary Islanders, which I'm going to do a video on. But it's really interesting because when you're looking at these documents and you're thinking, oh, I finally got the death certificate, I'm going to get the real information. You have to ask yourself, who is providing this information? Well, they'll tell you. And so the person who signed for this was his son, Modesto Simone. And that's the person saying, yes, dad's white, and this is where my grandparents are from. Would there be a reason for him to not want to say the truth? Maybe he didn't know. All kinds of things that we could read into and maybe won't know for sure. But I think what was really shocking to me about this was his gravestone, because like I said, I believe he was born in Louisiana, and his gravestone is in Spanish. I didn't learn Spanish. I haven't learned any other language except for English, and I can barely speak that well. But he's here, Alberto Simon Sr., and here his birth date was listed as 1850, died in 1944. Recuerdo de sus hijos. I think that means remembered by his children, which is crazy for me to see that because I don't speak Spanish, and there's such a disconnect to this part of the family. I have never seen myself as Hispanic, but a lot of times people will come up to me and assume that I can speak Spanish, and then we're both embarrassed. Or, there's just an assumption about it. And so it's been interesting to kind of pull back the layers on this. It's not that far back. I mean, this ancestor died in 1944. So my grandmother was 12 years old when he died. Now, she didn't know him or anything, but it's just amazing the different paths. It's kind of like a choose your own story, except we don't get to choose. Our ancestors do for us, of how are you going to be raised? What culture are you going to be raised in? What language are you going to grow up being comfortable around? What foods will your family make? On this side of the family, they're they made tamales. And I know that because I spoke with cousins in Louisiana. I had no idea about any of that. And I want to reconnect to that, and I want to preserve it.
My grandparents made them. It was a process because I remember my grandmother in the kitchen, my two aunts, and then a lady from the church. And I was allowed to help roll them was the only thing I could do. But they would get a whole hog head, literally a hog head. Nowadays they don't do it that way. They go parts of the hog meat for the tamale.
But it is part of this larger conversation of Hispanics in America, Mexicans wanting to be seen as white, wanting to be seen as American citizens, which that's what was required of them. And I think this is a super relevant conversation today as well. So let me know what you think about it, and we'll talk soon.
Over the last 2 years, I've been telling the stories that often get ignored. But lately, I've been facing an uphill battle behind the scenes of each video. My videos are getting flagged by YouTube when all I'm doing is sharing real history. If these stories have ever resonated with you or given you a new perspective, grab some Be a Good Ancestor merch and help me keep this channel going. Check out nytonashville.com.